My name is Teresa Wilson, and I am 27 years old. When I was 7, my mother told me she would be back in an hour after dropping me at our neighbor's apartment. That hour turned into 20 years of silence. I built a life without her, learned to trust again, and was finally finding happiness. Then last month, her call shattered everything. After 2 decades of nothing, she wants to meet. How do you respond when the person who broke you suddenly reappears? Let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to decide whether someone who hurt you deserves a second chance. It was a Saturday morning in May, unusually warm for that time of year. I remember because Mom had let me wear my favorite sundress with the yellow daisies, even though she usually saved it for special occasions. I was 7 years old and completely oblivious to what that day would bring. That morning had started so normally, yet looking back, there were signs I was too young to recognize. Mom made heart-shaped pancakes with extra chocolate chips, something she only did on birthdays or when I was sick. She helped me pick out my clothes, braided my hair with extra care, and kept hugging me for no reason. "You look so pretty today, Teresa," she said, straightening my dress collar. "My beautiful little girl." I beamed at the compliment. Mom worked 2 jobs and was usually too tired for such attention. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a complex that had seen better days, but Mom always made sure I had clean clothes and enough to eat even when I suspected she was skipping meals herself. "Are we still going to the movies today?" I asked, bouncing on my toes with excitement. She had promised the week before when she got her paycheck. "Of course, sweetheart. First I need to run an errand. It won't take long," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. After breakfast, Mom packed my little backpack with my coloring books, a juice box, and some crackers. Again, unusual for just a quick errand. Then she took my hand and led me down the hall to Mrs. Jackson's apartment. Mrs. Jackson was a kind widow in her 60s who occasionally watched the neighborhood kids for extra money. She had a fat orange cat named Pumpkin and always kept cookies in her kitchen. I liked Mrs. Jackson but was confused about why I needed a babysitter for Mom's errand. "Diane and little Teresa, too. What a lovely surprise," Mrs. Jackson said, opening her door wide. "Thanks for doing this last minute, Martha," my mother said, her voice tight. "I just need an hour. I have that appointment I told you about." Mrs. Jackson nodded like she understood something I didn't. "Take all the time you need." Mom knelt down to my level, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Her eyes looked watery, which confused me. "Be good for Mrs. Jackson. Okay, I will be back in an hour. Then we will go see that princess movie you wanted." I nodded eagerly, already spotting Pumpkin lounging on the windowsill. Mom hugged me tightly, much longer than normal, then quickly turned and left before I could respond. For the first hour, everything was fine. Mrs. Jackson let me watch cartoons while she worked on a crossword puzzle. I played with Pumpkin, who tolerated my attention with typical feline indifference. When the second hour passed, I started glancing at the door. "Mrs. Jackson, Mom said she would be back in an hour," I said, frowning at the clock on the wall. I was just learning to tell time and was proud I could see it had been 2 hours now. "I am sure she just got delayed in traffic, honey. Sometimes errands take longer than expected." By the 3rd hour, I had abandoned the TV and taken up position by the window, watching for Mom's blue sedan to pull into the parking lot. My stomach was growling, but I barely noticed. "Teresa, would you like some lunch? I made tuna sandwiches," Mrs. Jackson offered, her brow creased with what I now recognize was worry. "No, thank you. I want to wait for Mom. We are going to get popcorn at the movies." By late afternoon, Mrs. Jackson had called my mom's cell phone several times, each call going straight to voicemail. The sky outside had begun to darken, and with it, my mood. Something was wrong. Mom was never this late. "Maybe she had car trouble," Mrs. Jackson suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. At 6 o'clock, Mrs. Jackson called the apartment manager to check our unit. He reported back that the door was unlocked, but my mother wasn't there. Her car wasn't in the parking lot either. By dinner time, I refused to leave my post by the window. My throat felt tight and my chest hurt from holding back tears. "She promised we would go to the movies," I kept saying, as if repeating it would make her appear. Mrs. Jackson tried to coax me to eat some soup, but I couldn't swallow past the lump in my throat. The apartment manager came by with a spare key to our unit. He and Mrs. Jackson had a whispered conversation in the kitchen that I couldn't hear. When Mrs. Jackson returned, her face had that pitying look adults get when they know something bad that children don't. "Teresa, honey, it's getting late. I think you should sleep here tonight. I have a spare bedroom you can use." "But Mom will not know where I am when she comes back," I protested, panic rising in my voice. "I will leave a note on your door," the manager said gently, "and Mrs. Jackson's number." That night, Mrs. Jackson gave me one of her old nightgowns that hung to my ankles. She tucked me into the guest bed with its floral quilt and musty smell. I lay awake for hours, certain that any minute I would hear my mother's voice calling for me. The streetlights cast strange shadows on the unfamiliar ceiling. I cried myself to sleep, convinced Mom had been in a terrible accident. It was the only explanation my 7-year-old mind could accept. The alternative was unthinkable. I woke up disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar floral wallpaper and the sound of a percolator bubbling somewhere nearby. Then it all came rushing back. Mom hadn't come home. I was at Mrs. Jackson's apartment, and something was terribly wrong. I padded into the kitchen in my borrowed nightgown to find Mrs. Jackson on the phone, her back to me. She was speaking in that hushed, serious tone adults use when discussing things children shouldn't hear. "Yes, officer. She dropped her daughter off yesterday morning and never returned. No, this is completely out of character. The apartment manager checked her unit. Yes, I can keep the child for now, but..." When she turned and saw me standing there, she quickly ended the call. "Good morning, Teresa. Did you sleep well?" I shook my head, unable to speak past the knot of fear in my throat. "Your mom still isn't back, sweetheart. I called the police to help us find her." Within the hour, 2 police officers arrived at Mrs. Jackson's apartment. One was tall with a mustache, the other a woman with kind eyes who knelt down to my level. "Hi, Teresa. I am Officer Bennett. We are going to help find your mom, okay? Can you tell me what happened yesterday?" I recounted everything I could remember about the previous day. How Mom made special pancakes, how she said she had an errand and would be back in an hour, how we were supposed to go to the movies afterward. While I talked to Officer Bennett, the other officer and Mrs. Jackson went to check our apartment. When they returned, their expressions confirmed something was very wrong. "Her closet is half empty," Mrs. Jackson reported quietly. "Essential clothes gone, toothbrush, toiletries missing." "The dresser drawers were partially emptied too," the male officer added, "and there's no sign of struggle or forced entry." I didn't understand what they were implying. "Maybe she went to Grandma's house and forgot to tell us," I suggested desperately, though my grandmother had passed away the year before. Even at 7, I was grasping for explanations. The officers exchanged glances. "We will check hospital records and file a missing persons report," Officer Bennett assured me, squeezing my shoulder gently. As they prepared to leave, the male officer pulled something from his pocket. "We found this on the kitchen counter," he said, handing an envelope to Mrs. Jackson. "It's addressed to you." Mrs. Jackson opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was $200 in cash and a hastily scrawled note. Her eyes widened as she read it, then darted to me with that terrible adult pity. "What does it say?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Is Mom okay?" Mrs. Jackson hesitated before answering. "She says she had to go away for a while. She left money and asked me to take care of you until your father can come get you." My world tilted sideways. "My father? But I don't have a father. Mom always said he wasn't in the picture." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. My mother hadn't had an accident. She hadn't been kidnapped. She had left deliberately. Left me. By afternoon, a woman in a gray pantsuit arrived, introducing herself as Ms. Porter from Child Protective Services. She explained in gentle tones that I couldn't stay with Mrs. Jackson indefinitely. "But I want to stay here," I cried, clinging to Mrs. Jackson's arm. "Mom knows where I am here. She will come back for me." "I know this is scary," Ms. Porter said, "but Mrs. Jackson isn't a licensed foster parent. We need to take you to a temporary home while we sort things out." Mrs. Jackson knelt down, her eyes level with mine. "I am going to try to become your foster parent, Teresa, but it takes time and paperwork. You will need to go with Ms. Porter for now." "Please don't make me go." I begged, tears streaming down my face. Please. I will call you every day, Mrs. Jackson promised, her own eyes wet. And I will visit as soon as they let me. That evening I left with only my backpack and the clothes I had worn the day before. Mrs. Jackson had washed my yellow sundress, and it smelled of her lavender detergent. I clutched Pumpkin goodbye, burying my face in his orange fur until he squirmed to be released. The emergency placement home had 3 other foster children. The couple who ran it, the Thompsons, seemed nice enough, but overwhelmed. Mrs. Thompson showed me to a small bedroom I would share with a 12-year-old girl named Ashley, who barely looked up from her book when I entered. You can put your things in this drawer, Mrs. Thompson said, indicating a single dresser drawer. Bathroom is down the hall. We have rules posted on the refrigerator. I didn't unpack my backpack. There seemed no point when Mom would surely come back for me any day. I slept that night clutching my backpack like a lifeline, the last thing my mother had packed for me. The social worker assigned to my case, a harried woman named Ms. Winters, visited 3 days later. She explained they were trying to locate my mother and my supposed father, but had no leads yet. Can I call Mrs. Jackson? I asked. We will arrange a phone call this week, Ms. Winters promised. When I finally spoke to Mrs. Jackson, she had no news about my mother. The police are still looking, sweetheart. How are you doing? I want to come home, I whispered, aware of Mrs. Thompson hovering nearby. I know, honey. I am working on it. I had my first meeting with the foster care licensing people yesterday. Weeks turned into months. My 8th birthday came and went with no word from my mother. Mrs. Jackson visited when she could, always bringing small gifts, but the foster care licensing process moved at a glacial pace. As summer ended, Ms. Winters informed me I would be enrolled in a new school. The Thompsons' home is only temporary emergency placement, she explained. We are working on finding you a more permanent situation. By then, I had begun to understand that my mother wasn't coming back. The police had stopped actively looking. Ms. Winters no longer mentioned efforts to locate my father. When school started, I was placed in therapy with a kind woman named Dr. Martinez, who asked me to draw pictures of my feelings. I couldn't speak about the abandonment, so I drew black scribbles that covered entire pages. In October, Mrs. Jackson visited with Pumpkin's collar and my stuffed rabbit she had retrieved from our old apartment. The landlord rented your old place, Teresa, she said gently. Your mom stopped paying rent months ago. I saved what I could, but most things were gone already. I clutched the stuffed rabbit to my chest, its familiar softness unleashing the tears I had been holding back. For the first time, I let myself cry openly for what I had lost, not just my mother, but my entire life. Mrs. Jackson held me as I sobbed, her own tears falling onto my hair. In that moment, I finally accepted what I had known in my heart for months: my mother had abandoned me, and she wasn't coming back. The next 5 years were a blur of different homes, schools, and faces. After 6 months with the Thompsons, I was moved to a foster home across town with the Garcias, a couple with 2 biological children. They were kind enough, but I was clearly an outsider in their family unit. I lasted there for 8 months before being moved again when Mr. Garcia's job transferred him to another state. By 10 years old, I had attended 3 different elementary schools and lived in 4 different homes. Making friends became pointless since I never stayed anywhere long enough for connections to form. I learned to keep my belongings minimal, always ready to be packed at a moment's notice. Mrs. Jackson kept in touch as best she could, calling monthly and sending birthday cards, but her own health began to decline. Her arthritis made visits difficult, and after she fell and broke her hip when I was 11, our contact became limited to phone calls. School became my refuge. Unlike people, books and knowledge stayed with me regardless of where I lived. I poured myself into academics, earning straight A's and praise from teachers. It was the one area of my life where I felt some control, but emotionally, I was a wreck. Mother's Day activities at school were torture. While other kids made cards and crafts, I would ask to go to the library or feign illness. One year, when a well-meaning teacher insisted I participate, I ripped up the card I had made and spent the rest of the day in the principal's office. I developed behaviors that social workers labeled as problematic. I refused to unpack at new placements. I hoarded food in my room. I flinched when adults raised their voices or made sudden movements. I tested new foster parents by misbehaving as if to say, "Go ahead and send me away. I know you will eventually." The worst rejection came when I was 12. I had been placed with the Williams family, a younger couple who couldn't have biological children. For the first time since Mrs. Jackson, I began to feel at home. Williams taught piano and started giving me lessons. Mr. Williams coached Little League and took me to games. For nearly a year, I allowed myself to hope that maybe this placement would stick. Then Mrs. Williams discovered she was pregnant, a miracle they hadn't thought possible. At first, nothing changed. They assured me I was still part of the family, that I would be a big sister. I even helped paint the nursery yellow. But 2 months before the baby was due, my social worker visited for an unexpected meeting. The Williams had decided they wanted to focus on their biological child. There wasn't enough room in their small house for both children. I was being moved to make space for their real family. I packed my things that night, refusing Mrs. Williams' tearful explanations and apologies. The betrayal cut deeper than anything since my mother's abandonment. I had trusted again, and once more I wasn't enough to keep. My next placement was a group home for teenage girls, though I was only 13. It was institutional and impersonal, but in some ways, that was easier. No one pretended we were family. The expectations were clear and limited. Follow rules, attend school, don't cause trouble. I could do that. For the next 5 years, I lived in that group home, sharing space with a rotating cast of girls with their own trauma. Some had been abused, others neglected. Some had behavioral issues too severe for traditional foster care. All of us were unwanted in some way. I retreated further into academics, staying late at school to use the library, joining every academic club available. My grades were perfect. My disciplinary record was spotless. I was determined to age out of the system with a ticket to something better. My high school counselor, Mr. Ramirez, recognized my potential and took special interest in my case. He helped me apply for scholarships, wrote recommendations, and connected me with college resources for foster youth. "You have a bright future, Teresa," he told me during my senior year. "Don't let your past define what you can become." Thanks to his guidance and my academic record, I received a full scholarship to the state university. At 18, I was legally free from the foster system and ready to start a new chapter entirely of my own making. Before leaving for college, I visited Mrs. Jackson one last time. Now in her late 70s, she resided in a nursing home across town. Her once sharp mind had begun to fade, but she recognized me instantly. "Teresa, my dear girl," she said, her voice weaker but still warm. "Look how beautiful you've grown." We spent the afternoon looking through old photos she had kept. In one, I was holding Pumpkin, who had passed away years earlier. In another, I was wearing the yellow sundress from that last day with my mother. Before I left, Mrs. Jackson handed me a worn envelope. "I saved this all these years. I thought someday you might want it." It was the note my mother had left along with the $200 untouched. I took it outside to the nursing home's garden and burned it without reading a word, watching the ashes scatter in the summer breeze. Whatever explanation or excuse it contained didn't matter anymore. I was moving forward, and I was doing it alone. College became my fresh start, a place where no one knew me as the foster kid or the abandoned girl. I was just Teresa Wilson, business major with a minor in marketing. I threw myself into coursework with the same intensity I had applied to high school, taking extra classes each semester and working part-time at the university bookstore. I avoided the typical college social scene. No parties, no dating, no spring break trips. Relationships seemed like unnecessary complications, potential vulnerabilities I couldn't afford. My roommate freshman year, a cheerful girl named Lisa, tried repeatedly to include me in social activities, but eventually gave up in the face of my consistent refusals. "You know, college is supposed to be fun too," she remarked once after I declined yet another party invitation. "I am not here for fun," I replied. "I am here for a degree." And I was. My singular focus earned me a 4.0 GPA and the attention of professors who recommended me for competitive internships. By junior year, I had secured a position at a marketing firm that led to a job offer for after graduation. I graduated summa cum laude with no family in the audience to cheer as I walked across the stage. Mr. Ramirez, my high school counselor, drove 3 hours to attend, and his presence meant more than I could express. Mrs. Jackson had passed away during my sophomore year, another link to my past gone forever. My first professional position was as a junior account executive at Meridian Marketing, a mid-sized firm specializing in digital campaigns. The structure and clear expectations of corporate life suited me. I arrived early, stayed late, and delivered flawless work. My colleagues invited me to happy hours and office celebrations, which I attended briefly before making excuses to leave. It was at one such mandatory office birthday celebration that I met Anna Reeves, a graphic designer who had just joined the creative team. Unlike others who eventually stopped trying to engage me, Anna was persistently friendly without being pushy. "You don't like these office things either, huh?" she asked, catching me checking my watch for the third time in 10 minutes. "They seem inefficient," I replied. Anna laughed. "That's one way to put it? Want to escape? There's a quiet coffee shop around the corner where we can actually hear ourselves think." Something about her straightforward approach disarmed me. I found myself agreeing, and that coffee became the first of many. Anna didn't push for personal information or expect instant friendship. She simply created space where connection could happen naturally. Slowly, over lunches and coffee breaks, I began sharing small pieces of my story. Anna listened without judgment or pity, offering her own experiences of growing up with a single father after her mother died of cancer when she was 12. "Grief and loss change you," she said once, "but they don't have to define you forever." At Anna's encouragement, I resumed therapy with Dr. Lin, a specialist in abandonment trauma. In our sessions, I began connecting my adult behaviors to my childhood experiences. My workaholism, my avoidance of close relationships, my need for control all stemmed from that devastating day when my mother never returned. The breakthrough came after a particularly difficult week at work. Our department head, a mentor I had grown to respect, announced his immediate departure for a competitor firm. The news hit me harder than it should have, triggering a full-blown panic attack in the office bathroom. Anna found me there, hyperventilating and unable to speak. She calmly talked me through breathing exercises and stayed until the worst had passed. "What happened?" she asked gently. "I don't know," I gasped. "He's just leaving for another job. It shouldn't matter this much." But in therapy that week, Dr. Lin helped me see the connection. "Abandonment trauma doesn't just go away," she explained. "Your brain perceives any significant departure as a potential threat, activating that same fear response you felt as a child." This revelation opened the floodgates to other realizations. My refusal to date seriously wasn't just about independence, it was fear of vulnerability. My perfect apartment, always immaculate and minimally decorated, wasn't just aesthetic preference, but a subconscious preparation to leave at a moment's notice. "You've built your entire adult identity around never needing anyone," Dr. Lin observed. "It's kept you safe, but at what cost?" The question haunted me. My career was thriving. I had been promoted twice in 3 years and now managed my own team. I had purchased a small condo, proud of the security I had created entirely on my own. Yet, after work each day, I returned to an empty home, ate dinner alone, and spent evenings working more or reading in silence. Anna became my bridge to a wider social world. She invited me to small gatherings with her friends, never pushing but always including me. For the first time since childhood, I began developing friendships that weren't limited to professional contexts. It was at Anna's birthday dinner that I met her brother James. He had her same easy manner, but with a quieter energy. A high school history teacher with kind eyes and a thoughtful way of speaking, he wasn't what I expected in Anna's brother. "Anna tells me you're the marketing genius who saved the Parkson account," he said when we were seated next to each other. "That's an exaggeration," I replied. "I just identified a better target demographic." "And humble too," he smiled. Rare combination. What I had intended as a brief appearance at the dinner extended to dessert, then after-dinner drinks. James asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers. He talked about his students with genuine care, his face lighting up when describing breakthrough moments in his classroom. Before the evening ended, he asked for my number. I surprised myself by giving it to him. Our first date was at a small museum, followed by lunch at a nearby cafe. Unlike previous dates, I had endured conversation with James flowed easily. He didn't fill silences with nervous chatter or try to impress me with achievements. Why teaching? I asked over coffee. You're clearly smart enough for any field. Because it matters, he replied simply. Every day I get to potentially change someone's life trajectory. What better use of time could there be? His sincerity was disarming. In my corporate world, motivations were typically tied to profit margins and career advancement. James measured success by the light of understanding in a student's eyes. As weeks turned to months, James gently but persistently worked through my defenses. When I canceled plans last minute, he expressed disappointment, but didn't vanish. When I kept conversations superficial, he patiently waited for deeper sharing. He was the first person since Anna with whom I felt no need to present a perfect facade. 6 months into our relationship, during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin, I finally told him my complete story. We sat on the dock as sunset turned the water golden, and I shared details I had never told anyone, not even Anna or Dr. Lynn. The shame of being unwanted. The nights I cried myself to sleep in strange beds. The way I still sometimes bought the cereal my mother used to get me, a pathetic attempt to reconnect with a woman who had chosen to disappear from my life. James listened without interruption, his hand steady in mine. When I finished expecting pity or discomfort, he simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with your story." Later that night, he asked if I had ever tried to find my mother. "No," I said firmly. "She made her choice 20 years ago. I have made my peace with it." "Have you?" he asked gently. "Or have you just buried it?" I bristled at the suggestion. What would be the point to hear excuses to be rejected again? "No, thank you." James didn't push further, but the question lingered. Had I truly made peace with my abandonment, or had I simply built my life around avoiding its pain? As our relationship deepened, I was gradually incorporated into James's family. His parents, still happily married after 35 years, welcomed me warmly. His father taught me to fish on family trips to their lake house. His mother invited me to cook alongside her during holidays, sharing family recipes and stories. The contrast with my own upbringing was stark and occasionally painful. Watching James and his parents interact with such ease and affection sometimes left me feeling like an anthropologist observing an alien culture. The casual "I love yous" exchanged at the end of phone calls, the inside jokes, the unconditional support, all were foreign to my experience. Yet instead of pulling away, I found myself drawn to this family unit. They showed me what I had missed, yes, but also what was still possible. When James proposed after 2 years together, his parents were the first to congratulate us. His mother already talking about wedding plans and family traditions. For the first time in my life, I began to believe that family wasn't just something that had failed me in the past. It could be something I created in my future. Wedding planning became a welcome distraction from work stress. Anna appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, creating spreadsheets and Pinterest boards with characteristic enthusiasm. James's mother offered her backyard garden for the ceremony, a beautiful space she had cultivated for decades. 3 months before the wedding, Anna James's mother, Sandra, and I were at a bridal shop for my final dress fitting. The consultant had just pinned the last alteration when Sandra asked the question I had been dreading. "Teresa, dear, we've been focused on our side of the family, but is there anyone from your family you'd like to invite? Any distant relatives or old friends?" The bridal shop suddenly felt too warm, too small. Anna shot me a concerned look, knowing portions of my history. "There's no one," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's just me." Sandra looked momentarily startled, then squeezed my hand. "Well, you're part of our family now. But if you think of anyone later, just let me know." I nodded, grateful she didn't press for details. The truth was too complicated for a bridal shop conversation. How do you explain that your entire family consists of a mother who abandoned you and a father you never knew and couldn't identify? That your closest thing to family had been an elderly neighbor who died years ago? The subject was dropped and we moved on to discussing flower arrangements. By the time I returned to work that afternoon, I had pushed the uncomfortable moment from my mind. I had a quarterly marketing presentation to finish and a team meeting to prepare for. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. I was at my desk reviewing analytics reports when my cell phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the area code was local. Assuming it was a vendor or perhaps the wedding caterer, I answered professionally. Teresa Wilson speaking. There was a pause, then a woman's voice hesitant but achingly familiar despite the decades since I'd heard it. Teresa, is that really you? My body reacted before my mind could process what was happening. My hand began shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. My stomach lurched and my vision narrowed to a tunnel. 20 years vanished in an instant, and I was 7 years old again, waiting by the window for someone who would never return. Teresa, please don't hang up. It's Mom. It's Diane. As if I wouldn't recognize her voice. As if she were a distant acquaintance and not the person whose abandonment had shaped my entire life. I know this is a shock, she continued, words tumbling out rapidly. I've been trying to find you for so long. I need to explain what happened. Please, can we meet? I'm in town. I need to see you. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely, my chest so tight I couldn't draw breath. Without responding, I ended the call and stared at the phone as it immediately began ringing again. The same number. I switched it to silent and placed it face down on my desk. For several minutes, I sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Then the trembling began, starting in my hands and spreading until my entire body shook. I barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting, violently cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. Leaning against the bathroom wall, I tried to regulate my breathing the way Dr. Lin had taught me. In for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. But panic had taken over, my heart racing so fast I feared it might burst from my chest. Somehow I managed to text James, "Need you, can't drive, office parking lot." His response was immediate. "On my way, 15 minutes, hang on." I gathered my things on autopilot, told my assistant I was feeling ill, and made my way to the parking lot. Sitting in my car, I stared unseeing at the dashboard, my phone continuing to light up with calls from the same number. James found me there, still shaking, unable to put my keys in the ignition. One look at my face told him something was seriously wrong. He opened the passenger door and gently guided me to that seat, taking the keys to drive us home. "What happened?" he asked once we were moving, his voice deliberately calm. "She called me," I whispered. "Who called you?" "My mother." James's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the only indication of his surprise. "What did she say?" "She wants to meet. She's here in town." My voice sounded distant, as if belonging to someone else. "She said she's been looking for me." "How do you feel about that?" James asked carefully. A laugh escaped me, high and unnatural. "How do I feel? I don't know. Sick, angry, confused. She abandoned me for 20 years and now just calls out of the blue like she's an old friend checking in." We drove the rest of the way in silence, James occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. At home, he made tea while I sat at our kitchen island, still in my work clothes, staring at my silent phone. "She keeps calling," I said. "I haven't answered." "Do you want to?" "No. Yes. I don't know." I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. What could she possibly say that would make any difference now? That evening, as we sat on the couch discussing options, my phone rang again. The same number. James looked at me questioningly. When I made no move to answer, he asked, "Do you want me to talk to her?" Wordlessly, I nodded, handing him the phone. "Hello, this is James, Teresa's fiancé," he said, his voice neutral but firm. "Yes, she received your calls. I understand you want to speak with her. This has been very unexpected and difficult. No, I don't think tonight works. If you'd like to give me your contact information, I can pass it along." I watched his face as he listened, noting the subtle changes in his expression, the slight widening of his eyes. After ending the call, he sat beside me. "She's staying at the Westbrook Hotel downtown. She says she's ill and doesn't have much time. That's why she's trying to reach you now." "Convenient?" I said bitterly. 20 years of nothing, and now she's dying, so I'm supposed to rush to her bedside. She gave me her room number and said she'll be here for a week. James handed me a slip of paper with the information. "What you do with this is entirely your choice, Teresa. I'll support whatever you decide." That night, I barely slept, tossing in our bed while James breathed steadily beside me. My mind raced with questions. Why now? Was she really ill, or was it manipulation? What did she want from me? Money, forgiveness, a clear conscience before she died. The next morning, I called Dr. Lin for an emergency session. She made time for me that afternoon, listening as I recounted the unexpected contact. "What are you hoping would come from meeting her?" Dr. Lin asked. "Nothing," I said automatically, then paused. "No, that's not true. Answers, I guess. Why she left. Why she never came back or called or wrote. Whether she ever looked for me at all." "Those are valid questions," Dr. Lin acknowledged. "But are you prepared for answers that might be unsatisfying or painful?" I wasn't sure. The abandonment had defined so much of my life. What if the reason was terribly mundane? What if she simply hadn't wanted me? Or worse, what if she had a reasonable explanation that would complicate my decades of anger? "If you do decide to meet her," Dr. Lin continued, "it would be wise to set clear boundaries. A public place, limited time, perhaps having James nearby for support." Anna had similar advice when I called her that evening. "You don't owe her anything, Teresa. Not your time, not your forgiveness, nothing. But if you think meeting her would give you closure, then do it on your terms." After 3 days of deliberation, sleepless nights, and long talks with James, I made my decision. I would meet her once in a public place for a strictly limited time. James would sit at a nearby table, close enough to intervene if needed. I called the hotel number, half expecting she would have checked out already, that this whole drama would prove to be another abandonment. But she answered on the second ring. "I'll meet you tomorrow at the Riverfront Cafe at 2 o'clock, I said without preamble. 1 hour, no more. My fiancé will be with me." "Thank you, Teresa," she breathed, her voice catching. "Thank you for giving me this chance." "I'm not doing it for you," I replied coldly. "I'm doing it for me." I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding. After 20 years of silence in less than 24 hours, I would face the woman who had walked out of my life and never looked back. I arrived at the Riverfront Cafe 30 minutes early, needing time to compose myself before the meeting. James sat at a table near the back, close enough to see me, but far enough to give privacy. I chose a table by the window, positioning myself to face the door. Some childish part of me needed to see her before she saw me. The cafe was moderately busy with afternoon customers, their normal conversations creating a background hum that I found oddly comforting. I ordered black coffee I didn't want, just to have something to do with my hands. At 5 minutes to 2, she walked in. Despite 20 years, I recognized her instantly. Diane Wilson had once been beautiful in a soft, unassuming way. The woman who entered the cafe retained hints of that beauty, but time and what appeared to be illness had altered her significantly. She was thin to the point of gauntness, her once honey blonde hair now gray and cut short around a face lined beyond her years. She walked with a slight stoop, scanning the cafe with anxious eyes. When her gaze found me, she froze momentarily, one hand rising to her throat in a gesture I suddenly remembered from childhood. The familiarity of it sent an unexpected pang through my chest. She approached slowly, as if afraid I might bolt. "Teresa," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You look so beautiful." I didn't stand or offer my hand. "You can sit," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. She lowered herself carefully, movements suggesting physical discomfort. Up close, I could see the yellowish tint to her skin and the whites of her eyes. Whatever illness she had claimed was apparently real. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she began, hands fidgeting with her purse strap. "I've imagined this moment for so long." "Have you?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "All 20 years of them." She flinched but didn't look away. "I deserve that. I deserve your anger. I know nothing I say can make up for what I did." "Then why are we here? What do you want from me?" "To explain. Not to excuse, but to explain." She took a shaky breath. "And to see you, to know you're okay. To tell you I'm sorry for whatever that's worth." A server approached and my mother ordered tea with honey. The mundane transaction created a surreal moment sitting across from this stranger, who was once the center of my world, watching her interact normally with a waitress, as if this were any ordinary meeting. When we were alone again, An uncomfortable silence fell. I had imagined this confrontation countless times over the years, rehearsed cutting questions and accusations, but now found myself speechless. "Where should I begin?" she asked finally. "How about with why you abandoned your 7-year-old daughter without a word?" The question came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't soften it with an apology. She nodded as if expecting this. "I was in a relationship with a man named Robert. You never met him because he didn't like children. He was controlling, abusive." She touched her cheekbone unconsciously, perhaps remembering old injuries. "He threatened to hurt you if I didn't leave with him. Said he'd kill us both if I tried to take you along or told anyone about his threats." I stared at her incredulous. "So you left me for a man who didn't like children? That's your explanation?" "No, it's not that simple. I was terrified, not thinking clearly. I convinced myself you'd be safer without me, that Mrs. Jackson would take care of you until I could figure something out." Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was protecting you." The explanation rang hollow. Even if true, it didn't account for 20 years of silence. "And after you escaped this abusive man, what about the next 20 years?" She looked down at her hands. "I was an addict, Teresa. Prescription painkillers at first, then harder stuff. Robert kept me isolated and dependent. By the time I got away from him years later, I was in no condition to care for anyone, least of all a child." As she spoke, her story began unraveling, contradictions emerging. The timeline didn't make sense. The details shifted subtly with each new revelation. "Stop," I said, raising a hand. "Just tell me the truth, the real reason." Something in my tone must have reached her. Her shoulders sagged, and when she looked up, the practiced grief in her expression had given way to something rawer, more genuine. "The truth is, I couldn't handle being a mother anymore," she said quietly. "I was 23 when I had you. No education, no support system. Your father left before you were born. I was depressed, overwhelmed, using pills to cope. That day I met a man who said he could give me a fresh start in another state, but not with a kid in tow. It was a moment of terrible weakness, and I took the easy way out." The brutal honesty was somehow less painful than the manufactured excuses. This at least I could believe. "Did you ever try to find me?" She hesitated. "Not at first. I told myself you were better off without me, that someone more capable would adopt you. Later, when I got clean the first time, I called child services, but they wouldn't give me information. Said I'd surrendered my rights by abandonment. The first time, I caught the qualification. How many times have you gotten clean before?" She met my eyes directly. "This last time stuck. 5 years sober now. And in those 5 years you didn't think to look for me." "I did. I was just afraid. Afraid you'd reject me. Afraid of facing what I'd done." She pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbing at her eyes. "I have other children now. 2. A boy and a girl. They don't know about you." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Half-siblings I had never known existed. A family she had created after discarding me. "How old?" I managed to ask. 16 and 14. Different father than yours. A good man. We're not together anymore, but he's a good father." "Unlike my father," went the unspoken comparison. "Unlike her as a mother to me." "Are you really sick?" I asked, changing subjects abruptly. She nodded. "Liver cancer, stage 4. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less." "And that's why you finally decided to find me, clearing your conscience before you die?" "Partly," she admitted. "But also because they deserve to know they have a sister. My other children. And because I needed to see you to know you're okay, to tell you it wasn't your fault." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo album. "These are your siblings, Thomas and Lily. They're good kids." I didn't take the album or look at the photos. "What do you want from me?" "Forgiveness, a tearful reunion, to play happy family for your last months." "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, putting the album away. "I don't deserve it. I just want you to know I never stopped loving you, even when I failed you completely. And yes, I'd like you to meet your siblings someday, but that's your choice." Something inside me snapped. 20 years of contained anger rushed to the surface. You never stopped loving me. You abandoned me at a neighbor's house with a backpack of coloring books. You left me to grow up in foster homes with strangers. Do you have any idea what that did to me? The birthdays, the holidays, the Mother's Days all alone, the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering what I did wrong. The years of therapy just to be able to trust anyone. My voice had risen, drawing glances from nearby tables. James half stood ready to intervene, but I waved him back. You don't get to claim you loved me. I continued, lowering my voice, but not its intensity. Love isn't compatible with what you did. Tears streamed down her gaunt face. You're right. I failed you in every way possible. There's no excuse. Her capitulation deflated my anger slightly. Why did you really leave the honest truth this time? She was silent for a long moment. Because I was broken, Teresa. My own mother abandoned me when I was 12. I never learned how to be a parent because I never had one. I was repeating the only pattern I knew. The revelation stopped me cold. This was a detail I hadn't known, a context I had never considered. I thought I could break the cycle with you, she continued. I tried for 7 years, but the depression, the addiction, they won. When that man offered me an escape, I took it, telling myself you'd be better off without me. It was a lie I told myself to justify my weakness. For the first time, I saw her not as the mythic figure of my abandonment narrative, but as a flawed, damaged human who had made a terrible choice she couldn't undo. Did you ever think about coming back? I asked, my voice softer now. Every day for years, but the longer I waited, the harder it seemed. And then I convinced myself you must have been adopted by a good family, that disrupting your new life would be selfish. Our hour was nearly up. The server had long since stopped checking on us, sensing the intensity of our conversation. I need to go, I said, gathering my purse. It's too much to process. I understand. She made no move to stop me. Can I give you my number in case you have more questions or... She trailed off. James has it, I replied, standing. I don't know if I'll call. Teresa, she said as I turned to leave. Just one thing. Did you ever wonder if I loved you at all? I paused, the question hitting a nerve I thought long cauterized. Every day of my life. I did. I do. Loving you was never the problem. Being worthy of your love was what I couldn't manage. I nodded once, unable to respond, and walked away. James joined me outside, taking my hand without speaking. We walked 3 blocks before I could find my voice again. She has other children, I said. Teenagers. They don't know about me. James squeezed my hand. How are you feeling? I don't know. Angry, sad, confused. I stopped walking, turning to face him. She had a mother who abandoned her too. It's like some twisted generational pattern. A pattern you can break, James reminded me gently. I nodded, the thought both terrifying and strangely empowering. My mother's revelations hadn't provided the neat closure I'd secretly hoped for. Instead, they had complicated my understanding of her, of myself, and of the abandonment that had shaped my life. I don't think I want to see her again, I said as we resumed walking. At least not right away. And I'm definitely not telling her about the wedding. Whatever you decide is the right choice, James assured me. This is your journey, Teresa. I'm just here to walk it with you. As we headed home, I realized the ground beneath me had shifted. The mother I had alternately idealized and demonized in absence was now a real, flawed human being. The story I had told myself for 20 years had new dimensions I would need time to incorporate. Whether this would lead to healing or fresh pain remained to be seen. But for the first time, I understood that the abandonment that had defined me for so long was never really about me at all. The weeks following my meeting with my mother were a blur of emotional turbulence. Nightmares I hadn't experienced since childhood returned. I dreamt of waiting by windows, of running through empty apartments calling for someone who never answered. I would wake gasping, only James's steady presence beside me anchoring me to reality. In therapy, Dr. Lynn helped me process the complicated emotions stirred by the encounter. "You're grieving," she explained during one session. "Not just the mother you lost as a child, but the idealized version you created to make sense of her abandonment." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Children need to believe their parents are good, that they love them. When a parent abandons a child, that child often creates a narrative where the parent had no choice, where circumstances beyond their control forced the separation. It protects the child from the more painful possibility that the parent simply chose to leave." Her words resonated with painful accuracy. Despite years of anger, part of me had clung to the belief that some extraordinary circumstance had prevented my mother from returning, that she had been desperately searching for me all these years. The reality was more mundane and more painful. She had chosen to leave, chosen to start a new family, chosen not to search until her own mortality forced a reckoning. "What do I do with this?" I asked Dr. Lin. "She's dying. Am I supposed to forgive her? Build some relationship in her final months? Meet these half-siblings who don't even know I exist?" "There's no supposed to here, Teresa," Dr. Lin replied. "This isn't about what you owe her. It's about what you need for your own healing." After much reflection, I decided to write my mother a letter rather than meet again. Writing allowed me to carefully consider my words, to express my feelings without the emotional overwhelm of a face-to-face encounter. In the letter, I acknowledged the pain on both sides. I explained how her abandonment had shaped my life, the struggles it had created, but also the strength I had developed as a result. I didn't offer blanket forgiveness or promise a relationship, but I did thank her for finally telling me the truth. "I don't know what happens next," I wrote in conclusion. "I need time and space to process all of this. I can't promise I'll be ready for more contact before your health declines, and I won't pretend that's not difficult to write. But I want you to know that meeting you has helped me understand that what happened wasn't because I was unlovable or unworthy. That alone is a gift I didn't expect." I mailed the letter and returned my focus to the approaching wedding. The ceremony was just weeks away, and final details demanded attention. In a strange way, the wedding preparations became therapeutic, a reminder that despite my past, I was building a future filled with love and connection. On our wedding day, as Anna helped me into my dress, I experienced a moment of unexpected grief. Most brides have mothers to help them prepare, to share wisdom and traditions. That absence, always a dull ache in significant moments, felt particularly acute that morning. "You okay?" Anna asked, catching my expression in the mirror. "Just thinking about what should have been," I admitted. "It's stupid after all these years to still feel that gap." "It's not stupid at all," Anna said, squeezing my shoulders. "Some losses we never fully get over. We just learn to build our happiness around them." The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. James waited for me beneath a flower-covered arch in his parents' garden, his face lighting up as I walked toward him. Sandra, who had become a maternal figure in my life, dabbed tears as we exchanged vows. In that moment, surrounded by chosen family, the absence of biological connections seemed less important. We honeymooned in coastal Maine, spending 2 weeks in a small cottage overlooking the Atlantic. Away from work and wedding stress, with only the rhythm of waves and each other's company, I found myself regaining equilibrium. We hiked coastal trails, ate fresh seafood in tiny restaurants, and talked for hours about our future together. It was during this peaceful interlude that I received a text from my mother's number sent by someone else. Her condition had deteriorated rapidly. She was in the hospital and asking for me. We were scheduled to return home in 3 days. "We can go back early if you want," James offered, holding me as I processed the news. After a night of consideration, I decided to wait until our planned return. "These might be our only untroubled days before real life resumes," I explained. "I don't want to cut them short. And honestly, I'm not sure I'm ready to see her again." Upon our return, I went directly from the airport to the hospital. The fluorescent lighting and antiseptic smell brought back unwelcome memories of visiting Mrs. Jackson in her final days. A nurse directed me to room 418, where I paused outside the door, gathering courage. My mother looked even smaller than before, diminished by illness and the large hospital bed. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring vital signs. Her eyes were closed when I entered, but fluttered open at the sound of my footsteps. "Teresa," she whispered, a smile transforming her tired face. "You came." "I got your message," I said, remaining near the door. How are you feeling? Been better. She attempted a joke, then coughed weakly. The doctors say it's a matter of weeks now. I moved closer, taking the chair beside her bed. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've made my peace. She reached for my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I let her take it. Her skin felt paper thin, the bones prominent. Thank you for your letter. It meant everything to me. We talked quietly for nearly an hour. She asked about the wedding, smiling at the details I shared. I found myself able to speak more openly than during our cafe meeting, perhaps because the immediacy of her mortality removed some of the anger's sting. As our conversation drew to a close, she gestured weakly toward a small suitcase in the corner. There's something I want you to have. In the front pocket. I retrieved a worn photo album much older than the one she had tried to show me at the cafe. It's you, she explained. From birth to 7. I kept it all these years. Every school picture, every drawing you made. It's not much, but it's proof that you were loved even if I failed to show it properly. The album was surprisingly heavy in my hands, the weight of memories I had no access to until now. I didn't open it there, knowing it would overwhelm me, but thanked her for keeping it. There's a journal in there too, she added. I started writing to you after I left, things I couldn't say in person. It might help you understand, if not forgive. As I prepared to leave, she asked the question I had been dreading. Will you tell Thomas and Lily about me after I'm gone? I don't know. I answered honestly. I need to think about what that would mean for all of us. She nodded, accepting my uncertainty. Whatever you decide is right. Just know they're good kids. They would be lucky to know their amazing big sister. I left with the album clutched to my chest, a tangible connection to a past I had been denied. My mother died 8 days later, peacefully in her sleep, according to the hospice nurse who called to inform me. The funeral was small, held at a local chapel. I attended, but sat in the back, observing from a distance. I saw my half-siblings for the first time, a lanky teenage boy with my mother's smile, and a girl whose serious expression reminded me of my own at that age. Their father stood protectively beside them, a solid-looking man with kind eyes. They had no idea that the woman sitting alone in the last pew was their sister. After careful consideration, I decided not to introduce myself that day. They were grieving the only mother they had known. Learning she had abandoned another child decades earlier would only complicate their mourning. Perhaps someday, when their loss wasn't so raw, I would find a way to connect with them. In the weeks that followed, I slowly went through the photo album and journal my mother had given me. The photos showed a younger, happier version of the woman I had briefly reconnected with. In some, she held me as an infant, looking exhausted but proud. In others, she watched me open Christmas presents or blow out birthday candles. Evidence of a life I barely remembered, of a mother who had once tried, however imperfectly. The journal was harder to read. Started shortly after she left, it documented her spiral into deeper addiction, her attempts at recovery, her shame and rationalizations. Some entries were clearly written while intoxicated, the handwriting erratic, the thoughts disjointed. Others showed clarity and painful self-awareness. One entry from about 5 years after she left particularly affected me. Teresa would be 12 today, she had written. I wonder if she still likes horses and the color purple. I wonder if she hates me. She should. I hate myself enough for both of us. The social worker says she's in a good foster home now. I tell myself that's better than what I could give her. But the truth is, I'm a coward. Too afraid to face what I've done, too weak to make it right. The journal didn't excuse her actions, but it provided context I had never had before. She hadn't been a monster or a saint, just a deeply flawed human being who made a terrible choice and then lacked the courage to face its consequences. One evening, as James and I sat on our patio watching the sunset, I shared this realization with him. I spent so many years thinking there was something wrong with me, I said. Some fundamental defect that made my own mother not want me. Now I understand she was just repeating patterns from her own childhood, fighting demons I knew nothing about. Does that make it easier? James asked. Not easier. Different. I leaned against his shoulder. The abandonment wasn't about me at all. It was about her limitations, her trauma. Understanding that doesn't erase the damage, but it helps me carry it differently. James was silent for a moment before asking the question we had both been circling since before our wedding. Does this change how you feel about having children of our own? For years, I had been adamant about not wanting children, terrified of repeating my mother's mistakes or passing on whatever genetic flaw I imagined had made her leave. But the past months had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of family legacy. I'm still scared, I admitted. What if I don't know how to be a good mother? What if I carry her patterns without realizing it? You're not her Teresa, James said gently. You've done the work to understand your past. You've built a life based on responsibility and love, and you wouldn't be doing it alone. Maybe that's the difference, I said slowly. She was alone with her demons. I have you, Anna Therapy, a support system she never had. We didn't reach a decision that night, but for the first time I allowed myself to imagine a future that included children. Not as an inevitability or obligation, but as a possibility, a choice I could make from strength rather than fear. In the months that followed, I continued therapy with Dr. Lin, now focused on integrating my new understanding of my past into my identity. I had lived so long defined by abandonment that adjusting my narrative required conscious effort. I began volunteering at a local program for foster teens, sharing my experience of aging out of the system and building a successful life. Helping these young people so similar to my teenage self became unexpectedly healing. Their resilience reminded me of my own, their potential reflecting back what others had once seen in me. The photo album and journal from my mother remained on our bookshelf, no longer hidden away like shameful secrets. They were simply parts of my story, neither defining nor diminishing the life I had built. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I finally wrote letters to my half-siblings introducing myself and explaining our connection. I sent them to their father first, allowing him to decide when and how to share them. Whether this would lead to relationships remained to be seen, but the act of reaching out was itself a form of closure. That evening, James and I walked along the riverfront near our home, the same river that flowed past the cafe where I had confronted my mother a year earlier. You know what I've realized? I said as we paused to watch the sunset reflect on the water. Forgiveness isn't something you do once and it's finished. It's a choice you keep making day after day. For your mother, James asked. For her, for myself, for the little girl who waited by that window. I squeezed his hand. I'll probably always have moments of anger about what happened. But I don't have to let that anger control my future anymore. The river continued its steady flow, carrying away fallen leaves and reflected light. It struck me as an apt metaphor for my journey, not a neat resolution, but a continuous process of release and renewal. The past couldn't be changed, but it no longer held me captive. My mother's abandonment would always be part of my story, but it was no longer the whole story. I've spent 20 years defined by what I lost, I told James as we turned toward home. I think I'm ready to be defined by what I've found instead. In finding my mother again, however briefly, I had ultimately found a deeper understanding of myself. And in that understanding lay the freedom to move forward, not despite my past, but because of it, carrying its lessons without being weighed down by its pain. Have you ever had to decide whether to forgive someone who deeply hurt you? It's never easy to find that balance between protecting yourself and finding peace. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and growth. I'd love to know in the comments if you've ever reconnected with someone from your past after many years and how that experience changed you. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your past may shape you, but it doesn't have to define you.